What would you do if you saw a 7-year-old child standing alone in a parking lot at 11 p.m., clutching a torn backpack and staring at the taillights of a car driving away? Most people would call the police. But tech entrepreneur Marcus Chin did something that would change 2 lives forever. This is the true story of how one moment of compassion turned abandonment into opportunity, and why what happened next will restore your faith in humanity. The fluorescent lights of the Walmart parking lot cast harsh shadows across the asphalt as Marcus Chin pulled his Tesla into a space near the entrance. It was late, almost 11:30 p.m., and he'd stopped to grab some last-minute supplies for tomorrow's board meeting. As CEO of a tech company worth over $200 million, Marcus was used to long days and later nights. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to witness. As he stepped out of his car, something caught his eye. A small figure stood motionless about 50 feet away, barely visible in the dim lighting. At first, Marcus thought it might be a shopping cart or some debris, but as his eyes adjusted, he realized it was a child. A little boy, no older than 7 or 8, standing completely alone in an empty section of the parking lot. The boy wasn't moving. He wasn't crying or calling out for help. He was just standing there, holding what appeared to be a small backpack, staring in the direction of the parking lot exit. Something about the scene felt wrong, terribly, heartbreakingly wrong. Marcus had built his fortune on trusting his instincts, and every instinct he had was screaming that this child was in danger. He approached slowly, not wanting to frighten the boy, and called out gently, "Hey there, are you okay? Are your parents around?" The child turned, and Marcus felt his heart break. The boy's face was streaked with dried tears, his clothes were dirty and ill-fitting, and his eyes held a kind of resignation that no child should ever possess. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They're not coming back," the boy said simply. "My mom's boyfriend said I was too much trouble. He drove away." In that moment, Marcus Chin, a man who had negotiated million-dollar deals, who had stood before investors and convinced them to bet on his vision, found himself speechless. The successful businessman felt something crack inside his chest as he looked down at this abandoned child. Marcus knelt down to the boy's eye level, his expensive suit jacket touching the dirty asphalt. "What's your name, buddy?" he asked gently. "Tommy," the boy replied, clutching his backpack tighter. "Tommy Rodriguez. I'm 7 3/4. As Marcus talked with Tommy, the full horror of the situation became clear. The boy had been living with his mother and her boyfriend for the past 6 months after his father died in a construction accident. The boyfriend, Jake, had grown increasingly hostile toward Tommy, calling him a burden and blaming him for their financial problems. Earlier that evening, Jake had gotten into a screaming match with Tommy's mother about money. In his rage, he'd grabbed Tommy, thrown his few belongings into a backpack, and driven him to this Walmart parking lot. "Your kid, your problem," he'd shouted at Tommy's mother over the phone before speeding away, leaving the 7-year-old standing alone under the fluorescent lights. "My mom tried to stop him," Tommy explained, his small voice matter-of-fact in a way that made Marcus's throat tight. "But Jake said if she chose me, she could figure out how to pay rent by herself. She has to choose him. She has to." The pragmatic acceptance in Tommy's voice was devastating. This wasn't a child throwing a tantrum or acting out, this was a little boy who had already learned one of life's cruelest lessons, that sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you will choose their own survival instead. Marcus found himself thinking about his own childhood. He'd grown up in a loving home with parents who sacrificed everything to give him opportunities. His father had worked 2 jobs to pay for Marcus's computer programming classes. His mother had sewn his clothes until he was in high school, saving every penny for his college fund. The idea that anyone could abandon a child, especially their own child, was incomprehensible to him, but here was Tommy, living proof that it happened. And as Marcus looked at this brave little boy who was trying so hard not to cry, he made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Tommy," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion churning inside him, "I want you to know that what happened to you tonight is not okay. Adults are supposed to take care of children, not abandon them. And I'm not going to let you stay out here alone." For the first time since Marcus had approached him, Tommy's composure cracked slightly. "Are you going to call the police?" he asked, fear creeping into his voice. "They'll put me in foster care. That's what happened to my friend Miguel when his dad left." Marcus paused. The responsible thing would be to call Child Protective Services immediately. But something about Tommy reminded him of himself at that age, intelligent, observant, trying to be brave in an impossible situation. And Marcus knew enough about the foster care system to understand Tommy's fear. "Let me ask you something first," Marcus said. "Are you hungry?" Tommy nodded, and Marcus noticed for the first time how thin the boy was. When was the last time someone had made sure this child had a proper meal? "Okay," Marcus decided. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you some food, and we're going to figure this out together. I'm not going to leave you alone, Tommy. That's a promise." As they walked toward the 24-hour McDonald's across the street, Tommy surprised Marcus by asking, "What do you do for work? You have a really nice car." It was such a normal question from a child, the kind of innocent curiosity that cuts through even the most difficult circumstances. Marcus found himself smiling for the first time that night. "I own a company that makes software, computer programs that help other businesses work better," he explained. "What about you? What do you like to do?" Tommy's face lit up. "I love computers. At school, when we have computer time, I'm always the first one done with the assignments. My teacher, Mrs. Patterson, says I'm really good at figuring out how programs work." As they sat in the bright McDonald's, sharing a meal at midnight, Marcus listened to Tommy talk about school, about the books he liked to read, about his dreams of maybe working with computers someday. Despite everything he'd been through, this 7-year-old boy had hope. He had dreams. And Marcus realized that Tommy wasn't just a child who needed help, he was a remarkable kid who deserved every opportunity in the world. Over the next several hours, as dawn broke over the city, Marcus learned more about Tommy's situation. The boy's mother, Maria, was trapped in an abusive relationship with Jake, who controlled their finances and had isolated her from her family. She worked double shifts at a nursing home but barely made enough to cover rent. Jake didn't work at all, spending Maria's paycheck on alcohol and gambling. Marcus also learned that Tommy was extraordinarily bright. The boy had taught himself basic HTML by watching YouTube videos on the school library computers. He could solve math problems that most fourth graders couldn't handle. And despite the chaos in his home life, he'd maintained perfect attendance at school because, as he told Marcus, learning is the only thing that's really mine. By morning, Marcus had made a decision that surprised even him. He called his lawyer, his accountant, and then, most importantly, he called Maria Rodriguez. The conversation was heartbreaking. Maria was frantic with worry about Tommy, but she was also terrified of Jake's reaction if she tried to get her son back. She'd spent the night walking the streets, looking for him, knowing that Jake would explode if she called the police. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said gently, "I want to help you and Tommy. Both of you. I have a proposition." What Marcus offered was unprecedented. He would provide Maria with a job at his company, not charity, but real work in their customer service department, with benefits and a salary that would allow her to support herself and Tommy. He would also pay for them to live in a safe apartment, away from Jake. While Maria got back on her feet. In return, he asked for something unusual. He wanted to be part of Tommy's life. Not as a replacement father, but as a mentor. Someone who could nurture Tommy's obvious talent and make sure this brilliant boy had every opportunity to succeed. "I see something special in your son," Marcus told Maria. "He has a gift, and I want to help him develop it. But more than that, I want to make sure he knows that there are adults in this world who will never, ever abandon him." 6 months later, Tommy Rodriguez was a different child, not because his fundamental nature had changed, but because he was finally free to be himself. He lived with his mother in a safe, comfortable apartment. Maria had blossomed in her new job, her confidence growing every day as she realized she could support her family without Jake's manipulation and control. But the most remarkable transformation was in Tommy's relationship with Marcus. What had started as a rescue had evolved into something neither of them had expected, a genuine friendship that transcended age and background. Marcus discovered that mentoring Tommy was as rewarding as building his company. He taught the boy advanced programming concepts, but Tommy often surprised him with questions and insights that pushed Marcus to think differently about his own work. They spent Saturday mornings working on coding projects together, and Marcus found himself looking forward to these sessions more than his executive meetings. Tommy, meanwhile, had discovered what it felt like to have an adult who was genuinely invested in his success. For the first time in his life, he had someone who celebrated his victories, helped him through his struggles, and never, ever made him feel like he was too much trouble. The boy's grades soared. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, couldn't believe the change in Tommy's confidence and participation. But more importantly, the haunted look in his eyes, that premature resignation that had broken Marcus's heart in the parking lot, was gone. Tommy laughed now. He asked questions. He dreamed big dreams and believed they might actually come true. Tommy's story didn't end with his rescue, it was just the beginning. Inspired by what had happened with Tommy, Marcus started a foundation focused on helping abandoned and at-risk children, particularly those who showed aptitude in STEM fields. The Second Chance Foundation has since helped over 500 children find stable homes and educational opportunities, but perhaps more importantly, Tommy's experience taught Marcus something profound about success. For years, he'd measured his worth by his company's stock price and his personal net worth. Helping Tommy showed him that real wealth isn't about what you accumulate, it's about what you give and the lives you touch. Tommy, now 13, is thriving. He's already taking high school-level computer science courses and has created his own app that helps children in foster care connect with mentors and resources. He speaks at Marcus's foundation events, sharing his story and encouraging other kids who feel forgotten or abandoned. The night I met Mr. Marcus, Tommy often tells audiences, I thought my life was over. I thought nobody would ever want me around. But I learned something important. Sometimes the worst moments in your life are actually doorways to the best moments you haven't experienced yet. Maria Rodriguez has become one of Marcus's most trusted employees, now managing the customer service department she once joined as an entry-level worker. She's also studying business management in night classes, with Marcus's encouragement and the company's financial support. And Jake. He's out of their lives completely, and Maria has never been happier or stronger. The story of Marcus Chen and Tommy Rodriguez proves that extraordinary things can happen when we choose compassion over convenience, when we see potential instead of problems, and when we remember that every child deserves to be wanted, protected, and believed in. Marcus often reflects on that night in the Walmart parking lot and realizes that while he thought he was saving Tommy, Tommy was actually saving him. The successful businessman had everything money could buy, but he didn't have purpose beyond profit. Helping Tommy gave his life meaning that no business deal ever could. Today, Marcus keeps a photo on his desk, not of his company's IPO or any of his business achievements, but of Tommy at his middle school science fair, holding a trophy and grinning with pride. It's a reminder that success isn't measured by what you achieve for yourself, but by what you help others achieve. Tommy's abandonment could have been the beginning of a tragic story, another child lost in the system, another bright mind dimmed by circumstances beyond his control. Instead, it became the foundation for something beautiful, a found family, a second chance, and proof that sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen when we least expect them. The next time you see someone who needs help, a child, an adult, anyone struggling, remember Tommy and Marcus. Remember that you have the power to change a life, and that sometimes, helping someone else is exactly what you need to save yourself. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories that prove humanity still has heroes, and leave a comment telling us about a time when someone's kindness changed your life. Because every act of compassion creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can see, and every child deserves to know they matter. Tommy Rodriguez was left behind on purpose, but he was also found on purpose. And that has made all the difference.